One of the hardest parts to getting into playing the guitar is changing chords smoothly while keeping your strumming going. And with good reason, there's a lot going on here. And unfortunately, this is one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people quit playing the guitar. It's tough, but there are some things that you can do to make this a lot easier on yourself. So in this video, I'm gonna give you some tips for changing between chords smoothly, and then I'm gonna go through a small practice session that you can use on a daily basis to make sure you get this down and ensure that you have success on the guitar. And if you have any specific troubles or comments as you go through this video, you can always leave a comment below and I'll get back to you there. Okay, tip number one, know the individual chord shapes you're trying to switch between first on their own before even trying to switch between them. If you try to switch between two guitar chords that you kind of know but can't really go right to, it's just gonna be an exercise in frustration. So for example, if you're trying to switch between a G and a C major chord, make sure you can go to that C chord right away first, and make sure you can go to that G chord right away on its own before trying to switch between the C and the G chords. That'll make things so much easier when you start switching between them. Tip number two is only work on switching between two chords at a time, not three, not four. The more you can isolate the challenge and just focus on getting that motion, for example, the C to the G down, the easier time you're gonna have with it, instead of going between 3 or 4 chords. So just 2 chords at a time, and the more you build your chord changing abilities, the less this will apply, but in the beginning, this is really important. Number 3 is pretty practical, and that's just to practice multiple times a day if you can. The idea behind this is that the more times you force your body and your mind to recall something, the quicker you're gonna retain it, the easier time you're gonna have with it. So maybe try 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the evening, see how that goes. Number 4 is always be thinking ahead. And this boils down to just being aware and mindful of where you are in a chord progression or a song. So if you're on a G chord, be mindful and aware of what the next chord is coming up. And this kind of leads us into number 5, which is always think about how the next chord looks and feels before moving to it. So if you're on a G, think about the way the next chord feels. Think about the way that C chord feels and looks, and then make the move to it. If you're aware of what chord is coming next, you can think about the way it looks, think about the way it feels, and then make the switch. Number 6 is try to use common fingers for changes. So for example, if you're playing a G major chord like this, you can switch to an E minor chord like this, and you have your middle finger to kind of guide you into that E minor using that same finger. This doesn't work for every chord change, but often it will work for a lot of the chord progressions you're working through. Number 7 is get your guitar set up. And this really doesn't apply to technique or anything, but if you get your guitar set up to play as easily as possible without buzzing, you're gonna have a lot more enjoyable time playing your guitar just because it's not gonna be so tough on your fingers, and it's gonna be easier to make those chords and switch between them. It's worth the little investment you have to make to get it set up by a pro. We'll reiterate all these tips as we move through this practice session, so just be aware of them, and the more you go over them, the more you internalize them, the more they'll become automatic. Let's get into it. All right, let's get into this little 10 or 12 minute practice session that you can use on a daily basis to get to where you can switch between chords smoothly. And we have a couple of the tips for changing between chords smoothly kind of built into this practice session. So number 1 is only use 2 chords at a time, and you can use whatever 2 chords you want. The chords you're gonna be using in this little session are an E minor and a G major. And that kind of leads to the second tip. You have to be able to play these individual chords on their own first, be able to go right to them before trying to switch between them. So if you don't have the E minor shape down to where you can go right to it, that is what you need to do. Stop the video and work on just being able to go to that E minor on its own, and then being able to go right to the G on its own. And as you make these chords, just a couple of tips. Make sure your fingers are right behind the frets, elbows in a little bit to get a good angle of attack. Elevate the guitar a little bit if you need to put your hand in a better position to get a really good angle of attack on those notes. Right behind the frets, right on the very tips of your fingers. So I have a jam track for you at 2 different tempos, and kind of the process we're gonna go through for this practice session is using no jam track, no metronome at first, just to get the change down. And then we're gonna go through the jam track that's at a slower tempo, and then we're gonna go through the jam track that's at the actual tempo of the song Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. Just the intro bit, just switching between an E minor and a G. So get your E minor chord on, because that's the first one. And we're gonna go whole notes, quarter notes, eighth notes. So we'll go through that little progression of note values. So just at your own pace, count 1, 2, 3, 4. Now G, 1, 2, doing whole notes, 3, 4. And now as you do this, E minor, 2, 3, 4. You want to think about the next chord the way it feels. Think about that E minor 1, make the switch 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Back to E minor 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're having trouble making that switch and you're still doing one finger at a time, kind of like this, that means you need to go back and work on that G major a little bit more to where we can go all at once. So work on that for a day or two and then come back to this, just doing whole notes 1, 2, 3, 4. Think about that G, the way it feels, the way it looks, and make the switch. Think about that E minor, the way it feels and looks, make the switch. And also, this is a great example. These two chords are a great example of using a common finger or leading finger to make this change. Because my second finger right here stays on the second fret of the A string. So that's kind of my anchor point. I do move it up closer to behind the fret when I go to my G, and then a little bit scooched back when I go to my E minor. But that's what you want to do. So once you can do that, then go on to playing quarter notes. Same thing. So take it at whatever tempo you want, as slow as you need to. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Get ready for the E, make the switch. 1, 2, 3. Get ready. The more engaged you can just keep your mind in this, the easier time you're going to have making that switch. So be thinking about that G. Here it comes. 2. Here comes the E minor. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. One more time. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what happens is when you have more strumming going on, you have less time to, actually make the chord change. So if you're doing whole notes, you have more time to kind of let off that chord and go to the next one. When you're doing quarter notes, you have less time. 2, 3, 4. You just have the time between quarter notes to make the change. So it's a little tougher. Then the next level for this, at whatever tempo you like, is just eighth notes. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I'm going to use all downstrokes for this. So actually, maybe I'll use down and up. You can do whichever one you like though. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then G. Back to E minor. And all you can do right now is quarter notes and stay there on the quarters. That's fine. Hold the chord as long as you can until right before you need to change to the next chord. 3, 4, 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Okay, that is where you need to live for a while until you get that change down at whatever tempo you can. If you're doing good with this at quarter notes or whole notes, you can pull up the jam track at the slower tempo and then try to play along to that consistent pulse. That way it pushes you to make the chord changes on time and make them clean. Here it is at the slower tempo. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Just whole notes. 2, 3. Here comes the G. 4. Make the switch. Think about everything we talked about as far as making clean chords. 4, 1, 2, 3. Get ready for the change. 2, 3, 4. Back to the E minor. Leading finger, the anchor finger there. Hold it out as long as you can with the whole notes until the next chord comes. Switch. We're going to switch to quarter notes here in a second. Okay, 2 quarter notes. Go. 1, 2, 3, 4, get ready for 8 notes. If you can't do 8 notes, stay on the quarters. 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, So take this at whatever level you're at. If you need to stick with no jam track, that's fine. With whole notes or quarter notes, that's cool. If you can do this along with a slower jam track, whole notes, quarter notes, or eighth notes, that's awesome too. Let's go ahead and pull up the full speed version of this and just keep everything in mind we've talked about so far. You're only working on 2 chords, that's great. You need to be able to go to the individual chords first. Always think ahead about the chord that's coming up. Think about the way it looks and feels, and use that anchor finger to make the change. 1, 2, whole notes, go. 1, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. E minor, 1, 2. Get ready for that G. 4, 1, 2. Hold it there as long as you can. 3, 4. Change. 2, 3, 4. 1. Let's do some quarter notes. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. A couple more times. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get ready for eighth notes next time too. 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 2, 3, 4. And a quick change. 2, 3 and 4 and G. E minor. Think about the way that G looks and feels. Switch. E minor. G. So that's not the most glamorous type of practice in the world, but it is what you need to do to get better at switching between these chords. And like I said, you can pick any 2 chords that you're currently working on. And it may seem really slow at first, but you're building all this new facility with your hands that your body's not used to. So cut yourself some slack, give yourself some time to get this down, but also be as consistent with your practice as you can. Even practicing multiple times a day, once in the morning, once at night, will be really good for you. So what attracts you to the guitar? What makes you want to play it? For me, I just like expressing myself through music, and it's always been kind of therapeutic for me. Plus, I just like guitars. And if you have any specific questions that I didn't address in this lesson, you can always leave them in the comments below. And if you've come across some things over the years that have really helped you with chord changes, put those in the comments too. I'm sure a lot of people would like to see them.